By now, you've probably realised that every day is a school day on this channel. So, grab yourself a snack, strap in, pin back your lug holes and get ready for today's golden nugget, which is, what are stock buybacks? Well, I'm glad you asked. A stock buyback is when a company intelligently uses its own cash to buy back its own shares on the open market, making the stock prices higher, artificially. Stock prices tend to rise after a stock buyback because there's less of them for the market to buy. Think of it like this. If there are only 10 apples left in the entire world, the price of these apples would probably be, say, $1 million each. But if then suddenly there were only 5 apples left, then each apple could be worth up to $2 million. That's kind of how stock buybacks work. And there's a reason why companies do this and why Bernie Sanders and Warren Buffett are going to war over it. Here's what's going on so you can choose which side you're on. See, company buybacks increase shareholder value by boosting the company's earnings per share. But the real reason they started in the first place back in the 80s was that hostile takeovers were getting vicious, like Jaws, sharks in the water vicious. These takeovers were taking over because all someone needed to do was buy up a majority of shares of a company from the public market, and suddenly they'd have more shares than anyone else. Not good if you suddenly wake up and your company is no longer, well, yours. So companies bought their own stocks to protect themselves. By buying back their own shares, companies made it more difficult for an outsider to end up with a controlling stake in the company this way. Since then, stock buybacks became a common practice that's changed its purpose over time. Today, most companies use them as a way to return value to shareholders. Right now, in 2023, companies in the US economy spent a record total $1.26 trillion, that's trillion, on stock buybacks. And then, Warren Buffett came out of nowhere and dropped this. When you are told that all repurchases are harmful to shareholders or to the country, or particularly beneficial to CEOs, you're listening to either an economic illiterate or a silver-tongued demagogue. Characters that are not mutually exclusive. Translation: quit smoking, you dumb broke Bernie. Okay, so he didn't say it like that, but he may as well have done. But did he have a point? Well, Buffett argued that when a company buys back its own shares, it's essentially investing in itself. When a company bets on itself, it signals to lenders that it has a positive growth outlook, making it cheaper for them to borrow money to expand the company and increase output in the long run. Buffett claims that when a company has more access to money, it invests in new technology, creates more jobs, and this benefits the entire economy. That's not a bad point, which explains why stock prices tend to go up after a buyback.
The industry that is asking for $76 billion of corporate welfare today, over the past decade, spent $250 billion, 70% of their profits, not on research and development, not on building new microchip plants in America, but on buying back their own stock to enrich their wealthy stockholders.
So, why is Senator Bernie calling horse shit? Bernie thinks that stock buybacks are a way for companies to enrich their shareholders at the expense of their workers. He argues that instead of using their profits to buy back their own shares, companies should be investing in their workers by raising wages or providing better benefits. Bernie believes that by doing so, companies will not only improve the lives of their workers, but also create a more stable economy in the short term. And here's the thing. Bernie isn't wrong either. Companies regularly spend billions to buy back their own stocks, and yet cut wage benefits that only save them a few million. Now, that's actively hurting workers and the overall economy because these workers would probably spend more in the economy if they actually earned more. Okay, let's put it this way. If you had a spare $100,000, you probably would have less reason to spend it on food and bills and consumer products than if all you had was an extra $1,000, because most Americans earn $50,000 a year. An extra $1,000 would get spent straight away for one reason or another. Multiply that by about 150 million people and the overall economy would rise. So, by keeping that money from workers, companies create less demand for the very products they produce, and therefore slow economic demand. Interesting. Truthfully though, companies don't have to choose between one or the other, and maybe that's the common ground we can strive for. Apple showed us how it's done. They didn't have massive layoffs all through the pandemic and still did $90 billion of stock buybacks in 2022, the best of both worlds. So, what can we do about it? Well, first, if stock buybacks actually come at the expense of putting more money in the pockets of workers, then that's bad economics. But if buybacks protect the company from takeovers or help the company to expand, then go for it. However, workers should never suffer at the expense of stock buyback programs. And then you can make money from stock buybacks. Because whenever a company announces this, it's probably a reason for some price action in the market and long-term upside. Over the last 10 years, Apple spent over $500 billion on stock buybacks. and just look at their stock price. This probably isn't going to go away anytime soon. I made an entire video on financial lessons you should probably know by the time you're 30. So check that one out here. And even if you're over 30, there's still probably time for you, old timer. See you in there.